As everyone knows, has made such an impact in Los Angeles, especially in the Persian community, and it's really transformed the community. So I just want to wish them continued hatzlocha in their habotzas haTorah and raising the level of Torah and mitzvahs in the community. I was asked to speak about a topic that really is not spoken about too often, but a very, very important topic. We all know about Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is discussed so often. When people learn, they have shiurim in Hilchos Lashon Hara, but there's another issur, there's another prohibition that the Torah talks about, that a person commits with his speech, which is not Lashon Hara, but it's a different kind of Aveira with one speech. It's called Ona'at Devarim. Ona'at Devarim is when a person speaks to someone else and causes him pain through his words. He insulting, embarrassing a person, and causing anguish through words. The Torah says in Parshas Bahar, "Lo sonu ish es hamiso v'yoreisa melokecha." You should not wound somebody with your words, and you should have fear of Hashem. And Chazal learned from this pasuk that there's an issa of Ona'at Devarim, in contrast to Ona'at Momin. There's another pasuk. Ona'at Momin means that you're overcharging, price gouging, and you're overcharging for items that you're selling. That's in the area of dinim mominis, monetary onah. But then there's an onah just in talking to other people, and that's Ona'at Devarim. And the Torah says over there, "V'yoreisa me'elokecha," and you should fear Hashem. Chazal say, Hadova Mosol Alev, because Hashem knows what a person is thinking. What's his intent? What was his intent in speaking harshly, in insulting, in causing anguish to someone else with his words? And only Hashem knows what's in the heart of the person who's doing that. So if a person has Yiras Shamayim, and he realizes that Hashem knows the intent of his heart, right? So then maybe he'll refrain from speaking in that manner. And so we have these two different halachos of onah. There's Ona'at Momin and Ona'at Devarim. And the Gemara in Bava Metzia in Perek Hazov says that Ona'at Devarim is a more severe sin than Ona'at Momin in 4 ways. It's more severe. It's more severe than overcharging somebody when you're selling him, but causing a person anguish by speaking to him in a certain manner, that's more severe. In one way it's more severe, because at least by when one has committed a Ona'at Momin and he's overcharged, so you can return the money that you overcharged. But when it comes to Ona'at Devarim, you can't return it. You can't return the pain and the suffering that the other person had as a result of your insult or your embarrassing him. A second way is different. One's an Aveira that has to do with money. The other is an Aveira that has to do with the person himself. It's a direct affront to the other person. The third way that it's more severe is that the Torah says by Ona'at Devarim v'yoreisa me'elokecha. It doesn't say that by Ona'at Momin. So Chazal learned from here how severe the Torah considers Ona'at Devarim. And the fourth way is that the Torah says that if a person has been wounded through someone else's words and he cries out to Hashem in pain, in anguish, the punishment is going to come very swiftly. The punishment is going to come very, very quickly on the person who committed that Aveira. And it doesn't say that by Ona'at Momin. So there is an issa of Ona'at Momin. I want to discuss a lot of different examples of Ona'at Devarim. A lot of examples of Ona'at Devarim today, and many people don't realize that things that they say to another person, right, can be a very, very severe avera. Again, this is different than Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is when you tell somebody else about Reuven, and you say something bad, something negative about Reuven to another party. This is when you're directly speaking to another person and you're saying something that's harmful to him, that's going to hurt him, that's going to cause him anguish. That's Ona'at Devarim. Ona'at Devarim, the Rambam in the Sefer Chinuch say, applies by everybody, to every Jew, even Ketanim, even little children. Even children below bar mitzvah, a person has to be very careful how to speak to them. Of course, if you have to give them mussar, they did something wrong, so then there's a toelis, there's a benefit in speaking to them, and sometimes you have to speak to them harshly, and you have to yell at them, right? And they'll feel anguish, but it's for a good purpose. But if it's not for that purpose, or even if it's for a good purpose, it should not be overdone. You have to be very careful the way you're speaking to somebody else, even when you're reprimanding them. And even a cotton, when you're reprimanding him for doing something wrong, it has to be done in a manner which is not going overboard, which will serve the purpose for your telling him whatever you're telling him. There's a story they tell about the Chazon Ish, that the Chazon Ish saw a cotton. There was a cotton below bar mitzvah on Shabbos. He was moving something, which was a question whether it was muksa or not. It was questionable whether it was muksa. And the father came over, the father saw what he was doing, and the father started screaming at him and yelling at him that you could see that the cotton was really hurt by the father screaming at him, even though the father, his intention was good. He wanted to reprimand the cotton on muksa, but the Chazon Ish said he went overboard. The cotton might have been over in Issa D'Rabbanan of muksa. The father, he says, transgressed an Issa D'Oraisa of Ona'at Devarim. It was an Issa D'Oraisa because he was too harsh. It was too harsh, and it wasn't necessary. It wasn't necessary to serve the purpose of giving him mussar. The Gemara in Bava Metzia also talks about, especially the Gemara emphasizes that a husband has to be so careful how he speaks to his wife, not to insult her. If the cholent burnt, right, to insult her, to yell at her, that she's going to feel pain, she's going to feel anguish because of that. The Chazal are very, very makpid on that, and they say the reason is the fisha dimasa mitsuya b'cholei krova. Women are very sensitive. They're very sensitive, especially when their husband it speaks to them, right? And therefore, one has to be very, very careful how he speaks to his wife, because her tears can come very, very easily. Reb Chaim Vital, the Talmud of the Arizal, said, "Midosov shel odam nimdodos gefi yachzor al ishto." A person's midos, his character traits, are measured by the way he treats his wife. That's really the measure, the true measure of a person's midos, of a person's character. The way he treats his wife. Does he treat her with a sensitivity? Does he get angry at her? Does he insult her? Right? That's the true measure of the midos of a person. So the Isser of Ona'at Devarim applies in a number of different areas. If you embarrass another person, if you insult another person and you cause him anguish by insulting him, if you scare a person, you scare him that he doesn't realize, and you jump out of a closet and he gets scared, so a person feels pain, right? He was in shock. He didn't expect it, or any kind of anguish that you cause him through words or through actions. It doesn't have to be words. It can be through actions, and through actions as well. And I want to give you a number of examples of causing anguish to a person through your action. You didn't say a word to him, right? Of course, if you insult him or you embarrass him, that's certainly Ona'at Devarim, a very, very severe violation of Ona'at Devarim. But one can be over Ona'at Devarim even through an action, or through writing something, or through hinting, and that it's going to cause him anguish. So the poskim bring down that if someone is sleeping and you wake them up, you make a noise and you wake them up, and so they're going to have tsar. They're going to have anguish, and they're going to get upset. Why'd you wake me up? It's not that you're waking them up to go to shul, or you're waking them up for some kind of positive, necessary purpose. But if you wake up somebody, and you're causing them tsar, and they didn't ask you to wake them up at a certain time, right? So then that can be an issur of Ona'at Devarim. Now the Chafetz Chaim talks about waking up somebody as gezel sheina, right? You're stealing from his sleep. The poskim say it's not really an issur of gezel. It's not really an issur of stealing. Stealing has to be on something sheyesh bo mamish, something tangible, an object. But stealing somebody's sleep is really an issur of Ona'at Devarim. You're causing him you're upsetting him, and you're causing him anguish because he wanted to sleep. And you're waking him up. So in a certain sense, you are being over on Ona'at Devarim. If he wanted to be woken up, of course, or if it's l'tzorech mitzvah, he has to go to shul, he has to go to a shir, so then it's going to be mutter. If a person is making so much noise that you prevent somebody from falling asleep, right? Sometimes people have parties that go very, very late at night, and there's so much noise that other people in the building can't fall asleep. That's also Ona'at Devarim. The Rabbi Yachad Kollel, the Pischei Choshen, mentions that case. If you cut into a line in front of somebody, you cut in front of somebody in a line in a store, right? So that's a whole topic by itself. Right, cutting into a line in front of somebody. But certainly there are a number of prohibitions in doing that. One of the prohibitions is Ona'at Devarim. You've done an action that you're upsetting another person. You know how you feel if you see somebody cutting in front of you online when they shouldn't be doing that, right? It's very, very upsetting, and it's delaying. You're in a rush, and now you're delayed. And so there are a number of different isurim in that, but this one of the isurim would be Ona'at Devarim. You didn't say a word, but you did an action which is going to cause this other person anguish. And another example is smoking in the presence of somebody who is bothered by the smoke. That's also Ona'at Devarim. You're causing anguish to another person, right? That's why there's secondary smoke. I'm leaving out the health issues and the other isurim in terms of smoking, but causing somebody pain and anguish by smoking in his presence is also an issur of Ona'at Devarim. In other words, anything that you do which is going to cause tsar, which is going to cause anguish, which is going to cause pain, whether it's not physical pain, but psychological pain to somebody else, comes under the issur of Ona'at Devarim. And the Mishnah, the Yachad Kollel, breaks it down into two categories. The Yachad Kollel says there's one category of Ona'at Devarim in terms of business-related scenarios, which we'll discuss. And then there's another category in terms of spiritual scenarios. So, and this is all based on the Gemara in Bava Metzia. Gemara says the following: let's say you go to a store, and you're not interested in buying anything, but you go into a store and you start asking the salesman or the owner of the store, how much does this cost? And they think that you're really interested in buying it. You lead them on You're leading them on to think that you really are interested in buying it, but you had no intention to buy it. If you have an intention and you're really looking seriously and you see the price is too high or you don't like the merchandise, nothing wrong with that. But if you're just going in, I want to find out the price, but you're leading them on. You're not telling them that, I only want to know the price. I just want to see. I don't intend to buy here. You're not telling them that. But if they think that you want to purchase it, and your intention is not to purchase this item, so that's an issa of Ona'at Devarim. That's a Mishnah in Bava Metzia. And the reason for that is a number of different reasons. One reason is because when you walk out of the store, right, you're disappointing the salesman or the owner who thought they would have a sale. They thought they would have a sale, but you never intended. So therefore you're disappointing them. Disappointment is a form of tsar, is a form of anguish that they have. That's one reason. Meiri says there's another reason, because under certain circumstances it could lead to a loss for the merchant, for the seller, because of if he sees that you're hesitating, that you're not buying it, he might lower the price. He might say, "I'll give it to you for a cheaper price," and other people who might be there and overhear and hear that, right? So they might come and ask for that cheaper price. But the original person who came into the store never intended to buy it at all. So he's causing a potential loss for the seller. Well, that's okay. But it's only if you lead him on, and and Chafetz Chaim says you're wasting his time. Also, it's also a problem of the Ona'at Devarim is that you're wasting his time because you don't intend to buy. Right? So you're wasting the time of the salesman or of the owner. That also comes under the Ona'at Devarim. The disappointment, the wasting of the time, and possibly there could be a potential loss if he would lower the price and other people here, and now they demand to buy it at that lower price.
They would like that people who come to the store to be crowded.
What?
They would like that people should come to the store, that the store should be crowded. It looks better.
Yeah, well, that's okay. You can come in and it's crowded. But to waste the time, you're spending 15, 20 minutes with this salesman, and he's showing you all of the clothing or all of the furniture in the store, and you intend not to buy it. So that's Ona'at Devarim.
What if he's not the owner? He's just the salesman, and that's his job.
What?
I mean, he's not the owner. You go to the department.
That's his job, but your job is to do the right thing. Your job is not to waste his time if you don't intend. You don't intend to buy. And this happens very often. In scenarios.
But the question is, if the one who is losing money has the owner, or if the person that is not losing money, he's just standing there. He's Kmart or somewhere that they don't care if they sell or not. They're getting paid. Anyway.
If you know they don't care, so then that's okay, but they'll be disappointed. There will be a disappointment. If you spend 20 minutes with a salesman and he thinks that he's going to make the sale, right? And then you walk right out, he's disappointed. It's not like you ask him, where's size 40 short? And he's just telling you, go look on the rack over there. That's one thing. But if you're spending time with him and he'll be disappointed and you never intended, what?
Not on commission, there's nothing that for him to...
He'll be disappointed.
He works for $10 an hour. He works for $10 an hour. This guy's thing isn't that high.
I think there'll be a disappointment anyway. You don't know that for sure. You don't know that for sure. As long as there could be a disappointment because you spent... There's a disappointment. There is a disappointment. Yes.
Would that be masking that maybe people also do the same thing? It is the idea of their advertising.
Yeah.
And one form of advertisement is they would rather that somebody who also is not interested at all come to store, because from 100 people that they come in, maybe 20%, 25% they buy. And they would love it, they would want, they do a lot of sticks and things around that you should come to store and get to a negotiation and talking and convincing.
Yeah.
From 100, 10, 15, it's worth it.
That's only if you're going into the store and there's a possibility that you'll buy. There's a possibility. So even if it's only a small chance, but your mind is open, if I find the right thing in the right price, I'll buy. If you go into the store with the intention, I don't want to buy, I'm just searching around in this store, or a person, let's say, bought something already. He bought something already. He bought a piece of furniture. Now he goes to a furniture, he wants to compare. Did I get a good price on what I bought, or is the store will give me a better price? He's not going to buy. He's going only to look. And he's wasting their time, and if he leads them on, if he comes in and says, I just want to compare prices, that's all. I'm not interested in buying, I want to compare prices. So when you do me a favor, that's fine. But if he leads them on, that they think that there's a strong possibility that he may buy, that's Ona'at Devarim. That's why this is such an important topic.
Ona'at Devarim applies to Goyim as well?
So Ona'at Devarim does not, the lav does not apply to Goyim, because the Torah says, Lo sonu ishes amiso, but there could be a chilul Hashem. There could be a chilul Hashem. And you always have to be so careful in terms of chilul Hashem. So a person, and if a person gets in the habit of doing it with Goyim, he'll get into the habit of doing it with Jews as well. Right? We know that's what happens. Or the nifal kifi pulosav, as the Sefer Chinuch says, a person's affected by his actions, and then if he does it with Goyim, it'll become nasa keheta, and he'll do it with Jews. He'll do it with Jews as well. So you have to be very, very careful about this practice. What's that?
Why is it called Ona'at Devarim?
Because most of the time it occurs through words. Insulting, embarrassing, speaking, but the poskim will say that it's lav dafka devarim. It could be through actions or through ma'aseh, through actions. As long as you're causing tsar to another Jew. The Pischei Choshen does point out that if a person goes into a store, right, with the intention of possibly buying there, and he goes from one store to another to find the best price or to find the best merchandise, right, there's no issue in that, because that's the way business is done. But if you're coming in with the intention that I don't want to buy, I just want to look, and looking by yourself is okay, but wasting the time and leading on the salesman or the owner, that's going to be a problem.
Can you call your competition and ask for his prices?
Yeah, I think, because you're not
stealing his time?
You're not stealing his time that much. And they know, if you're calling over the phone, they know that there's a very strong possibility that you might not buy from them. You're comparing his price to other prices. They know that, right? So there's not going to be that disappointment. But when you do it in person, that is a problem of Ona'at Devarim.
The question was, he's comparing with it. He's a store. He has a store himself. He calls another store to find out what is his price to match the price. He's not intending to buy everything. He's asking the question. But here the question is that he has the store himself.
Oh no, he's asking a question. Somebody calls up the store and asks, "What do you charge for this piece of furniture?" That's all.
No, it was my own comment. I'm sorry. His question was that he's at the store. He's asking another store, "What's your price?"
That might be different. That might be different. That's already. If they would know that you want, they would be upset about that. If they would know, yeah. But we're talking about a person who's just called.
Are you kidding me? If you have a cell phone store for repair, half the phone calls you get are from your competition asking you what's your price, and you know it's your job to realize is this a real customer or not.
Okay, so but then it depends on what you want to do. Depends. That's up to you to answer or not to answer. Another example.
So you can't call?
What?
You find out his prices?
As competition?
He changed.
As competition, I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem. If you're competition and you want to find out his prices by calling him.
The average price is $120 to repair this thing. This guy, every day, he goes down another $10 every month. You can't call and find out what. I have to tell my friend, you call and check the price. If my friend calls, it's halachically okay.
If he doesn't cause him pain because he doesn't know he's
Yeah, he doesn't know he's a competition. Maybe that's different. Yeah, if he doesn't know. What? It's a very short call. I don't know. I have to think about it. I have to think about that question.
The guy who's standing there picking up phone calls and
He must have a cell phone store.
I know. No, but this comes up in business a lot. The guy who's standing there, it's not the owner, it's the worker. And for him, if he's not picking up the phone or doing something, what do you think he's doing? He's watching a movie on the screen until someone walks in. So we're not wasting anyone's time. If anything, we're giving the owner.
I don't know about that. I don't know. There's a disappointment if you're confronting him. You're confronting him, you're in person, and you lead him on. You're leading him on. There's a disappointment. Just try to imagine you're in his shoes. Try to imagine that. Another example, if somebody wants to, this is a little bit extreme, this example, but somebody wants to buy grain, and he comes to someone else and asks him, where can I find grain? Where can I go to buy grain? And the person answers him, and he sends him someplace. It's a wild goose chase, as they say in English. Where he's saying him, and maybe, I don't know what it is in Persian, but a wild goose chase means you're sending him to a place where they're not selling grain. It's sort of like somebody wants to buy a hammer and nails. Right? And they ask, where can I buy a hammer and nails? So you give him an address. It turns out it's a pharmacy. It's a drugstore, right? You don't buy a hammer and nails in a drugstore, right? You sent him on. There's no purpose, but when he arrives there, right, and he sees that he's not going to get the hammer and nails there, or he's not going to be at the gate. He's disappointed, right? He's upset. Right? That's a Sauer. That's also Ona'at Devarim. You said something to him which is going to cause him tsar eventually. He's wasting his time, and also it's going to cause him tsar because he's disappointed. This is not the place where I can buy that grain or the hammer and nails.
Ronnie, you want to get crank on someone.
Yes.
Beginning he's upset, but at the end he's going to start laughing.
If you know it's a person who loves pranks, and yeah.
It's funny, he's going to start laughing.
Yeah, no, but you caused him tsar first. You caused tsar. Yeah, you caused him tsar. A prank that's a very good example. If you cause him tsar, he was embarrassed. Right, and afterwards he'll laugh about it. But now he has tsar. That's a nisa of Ona'at Devarim. Unless if you know it like it's on Purim, and on Purim everyone's going to laugh about it right away. But otherwise, you're causing him tsar. That's going to be a problem. That's in the area. Some examples in the area of business, in the area of monetary matters, Ona'at Devarim. Then there's a whole other area that the Mishnah discusses about in spiritual matters, spiritual and psychological pain that you can cause somebody. So the Mishnah gives an example. Someone's a Baal Tshuva, right? For many years they weren't frum, and then they became a Baal Tshuva, and you shouldn't go over to them, obviously, and say, I remember when you did this Aveir, I remember when you used to go to McDonald's, I remember when you were Mechalel Shabbos, right? You're reminding them of their lifestyle before before they became Balei Tshuva. That's Onas Devarim. That's going to cause them pain. Of course, if they're willing to talk about it and they start a conversation about it, I remember what I was before I became a Baal Tshuva, so no, you can continue that conversation. But to go over to them and remind them what they were before they were Chayzer B'Tshuva, or someone is a ger, someone was Megaya, a convert, and to go over and say, before you were Megaya, you came from this family, you were not Jewish, and to cause them anguish, right? That's especially severe, because by a ger, not only is there the regular Issa of Onas Devarim, there's a special pasuk in the Torah, Lo Sone Es HaGer, not to cause anguish to a ger, not to cause anguish. So one is in violation of two prohibitions: the regular Issa of Onas Devarim to a Jew, and a special Issa on Onas Devarim to a ger. Or the same applies if you talk about you people of a certain family, that there's a certain pagam, there's something wrong. You're telling somebody that in your family there's something wrong in the family, or even somebody from a certain city, and you talk to them about the people of that city in a very negative way, right? That's Onas Devarim. You're causing them anguish. See, these halachas, Onas Devarim is a very generic category. You have to know the examples, the applications, the specific applications of Onas Devarim to really understand what's involved in Onas Devarim. Another example the Gemara gives is somebody who's sick. They're sick, Rachmana litzlan, they have cancer. They came down with, they were diagnosed with cancer. And somebody, or they lost a relative, a very close relative, child, chas v'sholom, Rachmana litzlan. And if somebody goes over to them and says, it's because you did this, you did that, because of certain averis that you did. That's why you're being punished. Like, who did that in Tanakh? Who did that? By Eov, right? The friends of Eov came to Eov, and they said to Eov, the reason why you're being punished is because you did such and such, right? Of course, how did they know? They didn't know. But they accused them of doing certain averos, and it's because and therefore you're being punished by Hashem. So that's an issa of Onas Devarim. Only a Navi could know that. Only a Navi like Moshe Rabbeinu could know the exact reason why a person is being punished. But to go over to somebody and say, it's because of certain things that you did, that's why you're being punished. That's an issa of Onas Devarim. Now, does that mean you can never reprimand a person? Of course you can. There's a mitzvah tochocha in the Torah, right? To give tochocha, to give musa to a person. But when you're giving musa to a person, you're reprimanding him, you have to do it in a very tactful way. Your kavana should not be to cause him tsar, should not be to cause him anguish. Your kavana, your intent has to be misakein, to rectify, to correct the situation. You're not interested in embarrassing him. You're not interested in causing him anguish. You're just interested in being machzira l'mutav, that he should correct his ways, right? And you have to do it. You have to, once again, you can't go overboard. You have to know. It's not an easy thing to give musa. You have to know exactly how to do it with, thinking about it first, and what words to say, how to say it, and certainly the intent should not be to cause him tsar. The intent should be just to correct his ways, to make him aware that he's doing something wrong, and that he should change on that. So even in giving tochocha, in giving musa, a person, it could enter into the area, into the realm of Onas Devarim if it's not done properly. And on this, there's no set formula. Person has to use his seichel. He has to use his intelligence. How to give the musa and how to say it, and not to say more or to say it too harshly that it's going to cause him tsar. Just two more examples. Then I'll take some questions. The Shulchan Aruch says that if a question is asked that requires certain, a difficult question that requires an answer, you shouldn't ask somebody this question if you know they don't know the answer, because it will embarrass them. You shouldn't point to somebody and say, can you answer this question? And you know that they don't know the answer, because it's too difficult. And that applies even in terms of Talmidim, even in terms of students. If you know that the student doesn't know the answer, and in front of the class, you're going to ask him that question directly. Do you know the answer to this question? You know he doesn't know the answer. That's going to embarrass him in front of the rest of the class. You shouldn't do something like that. If you're not sure whether he knows it, that's okay. But if you know that he doesn't know it, you shouldn't do that, because that will embarrass him. They tell a story about the Chafetz Chaim. I read this recently, that the Chafetz Chaim's family told over that when he had guests in his home on Shabbos, right, the Chafetz Chaim would not turn to them and ask them, say a Dvar Torah on the Parsha, because they might not be able to, and then they'll be embarrassed. If you know that they have something to say, that's wonderful to ask the guest to say a Dvar Torah on the Parsha. But if you don't know, or even you have a suffix, you have a doubt whether they know, right? You have to be so careful not to embarrass them in front of the other people. So you see how far and how expansive this Isser is. Sometimes, however, in terms of Talmidim, in terms of students, you can ask him a question to sort of, and you're not sure whether he knows the answer or he doesn't, but to test him. Because that's part of teaching. That's part of chinuch, of education. So that sometimes you can ask, but if you know that he doesn't know the answer and you're asking him the question to embarrass him in front of the rest of the class, that would be an issa on the Rabbi of Ona'at Devarim, an issa d'oraisa. An issa d'oraisa. If you're asking him a question, he's the only one in the class who can answer the question, right? And you want to build him up in the eyes of the other Talmidim, so that's okay. But to ask a question which will be embarrassing to him, so that is a problem of Ona'at Devarim. So Ona'at Devarim, to a great extent, has to do with your intent. Has to do with your intent. If your intent is to cause him anguish, your intent is to embarrass, or to insult, or to get him upset, that's the main issur, the main prohibition of Ona'at Devarim. However, the Sefer Chinuch does point out that you have to be careful, even in cases where your intent is not to cause him tsar, but it might cause him tsar. You have to be careful about that as well. Then you're doing the Avera B'Shogeg, unintentionally, but still an Avera B'Shogeg. The Mazid, where your intent is to cause him tsar, that's extremely severe, because that will be a violation of Ona'at, of the Issa of Ona'at Devarim, and that's something that really hurts a person. It hurts a person, as Chazal say, more than a loss of money, a loss of his kavod, of his dignity, right? That's much worse, much worse. So this is the basic guidelines in terms of Ona'at Devarim. So where is it mutter? Where will it be permissible? So the Rambam writes in Hilchos Talmud Torah, if a Rabbi sees the Talmidim are not learning, they're wasting their time, right? They're wasting their time. It's not, if what they learned is too difficult for them and they can't understand it, so the Rebbe has to be patient with them and has to repeat it. But if he sees that they're wasting their time, so then he's allowed to get upset at them, and he's even allowed to scream at them and even to embarrass them. That you're lazy, he has to do it with seichel, right? He has to use common sense how to do it, but he's allowed to do it because that serves a positive purpose. It's necessary. But if it's just too difficult for them, so then he has to be patient. He's not allowed, if he screams at them and he calls them certain names that that derogatory names. So that certainly is not chinuch, and that will be an issa of Ona'at Devarim. But if it's truly within the realm of chinuch, and sometimes you have to discipline, and you have to become harsh with the talmidim, but in your heart you shouldn't be harsh. You shouldn't be angry in your heart. You can have the students, they think that you're upset because you have a good reason to be upset, but in your heart you should have that love for the Talmidim, and that's the love of a Rebbe. That's just like a parent who disciplines his child, right? And he has to yell at the child because they did something wrong, they did something dangerous, they did something that he has to teach them that this is not the right thing. So of course he's allowed to yell at the child. But in his heart, he loves the child. He's doing it only for the benefit of the child. That has to be the approach of a Rebbe as well. Let me just take one or two questions now. Yes.
It seems you're saying by toilet there is a reason to do it. It's musar. But who's toilet and how far do we go by toilet?
Toilet, yeah.
What if someone is doing Ona'at Devarim to you? He's putting you down all the time, and you did tell him to stop, and all.
You are mechavin to the next halacha. You're mechavin, the next halacha. There's an amazing sefer chinuch. What happens if somebody is insulting you? Right? He called you a name. He's insulting you. Right? Do you have to remain silent? Or can you respond back to him and insult him back? Anybody know? Can you, if somebody is embarrassing you, at that time, can you embarrass him back? He called you a name, can you call him back another name? Or the same name? The what? No. Everybody thinks no. What? Everyone thinks no. That's the common answer. People think no. The answer is yes. You're allowed to insult him back as long as it's at the time when he is insulting you. If he is insulting you in front of other people, embarrassing you, you are allowed to respond. You don't have to be like a stone. Like a stone. The Sefer Chinuch says this, as long as it's at Bishas Chimum, at the time when he's doing it. Not to come back the next day and insult. If you come back the next day and insult him, we call that what? That's nekama. That's revenge. That's lo sikom v'lo sitor. But if you're doing it at the time when he is insulting you, when you're emotionally involved, and you feel very, very upset because of what he's saying, you're allowed to respond to him. The Sefer Chinuch says two reasons why you're allowed to do that. First of all, lo nitna Torah l'malachei hasharis. Torah was not given to angels. It was given to people of flesh and blood, human beings. A person's insulted, the Torah doesn't require that he be like a stone, like a hard rock, and not feel anything. You feel upset, you feel embarrassed, and therefore the Torah allows you to respond. Not only that, if you don't respond, it might be in the eyes of other people that you're modeh. You're admitting to what he's saying. Right? You maybe even have an obligation to respond. Not just you're allowed to respond, but it might be obligatory as well on you to respond so that people shouldn't think, oh, what the other person is saying is true. That's number one. Number two, the Sefer Chinuch has a fascinating source for this. Self-defense. The Torah says, above a machteres, if someone is breaking into your house, right, to steal, what's the din? What does the Torah say? What?
You can kill him.
You can kill him in self-defense.
Because he came to kill you.
No, yeah, okay. But the Sefer Chinuch extrapolates this halacha to insults as well. Self-defense is not only in terms of your life. Self-defense, you can defend yourself in terms of somebody insulting you, embarrassing you, that a person does not have to suffer the harm, right, and the hurt that someone is causing him. You're allowed to save and protect yourself protect yourself, right? He's coming with words against you. You're allowed to come with words against him now. You can't take out a gun and shoot him, obviously, right? If he's embarrassing you. You can't shoot him. But you can defend yourself with words. He's attacking you with words. You can defend yourself with words. If he attacks you by breaking into the house, but if we're talking about a person, a normal person, and he's insulting you, you're allowed to insult him back. You don't have to. You're allowed to. And let me just finish this idea. The Sefer Chinuch says, but there is a midas chasidus. Lifnim mishuras hadin, not to respond to him, even though he has insulted you. That's called ne'elovim ve'enam olvim. You're embarrassed, but you're not going to embarrass back. Shomim cherposom ve'enam mishivim. You hear your shame and you don't respond. So the Chazal say the pasuk ve'ohavo kitzeis Hashem is bigvuroso applies to him. This is a person who has tremendous inner strength, tremendous gvura, not to respond. But that's a midas chasidus. That's a righteous act. That's not obligatory. You have the right to respond. But there are people who won't respond when somebody is insulting them or embarrassing them, and the Sefer Chinuch explains why. Why won't they respond if it's mutter, if it's permissible for them to respond? Because they're afraid that it will raise the ante, like you were saying, that it's going to, you might respond too harshly, and then he'll come back and respond to you, and there'll be World War III. It'll just continue. So you want to stop it right then and there. It's permissible to respond to the insult at the time, but if a person wants to act b'midas chasidus, then he's ne'elovim ve'enam olvim. He'll take the shame, right, and he won't respond. But that's a very, very high midah. That's a very, very high level. Yeah, so other people should stop them if they're insulting the rabbi. They shouldn't leave it to the rabbi to respond. The other people definitely should be involved and stop him from doing that.
Or usual people, let's say they make in front of people, they want to insult the religion. Could you answer them back?
Like, oh,
They are not talking with you. They talk general, they want to,
put down your religion.
Yeah, so that's insulting you as well. But it's insulting Torah, it's insulting Hashem. Yeah, then you certainly have to respond in the case like that. Just a few more halachas.
It's a level of madrigal, but it's not because if I say, he's going to say, and it's going to be attack and contradict. It's because that I realize that what came to me, I deserved it.
That's another reason. The Sefer Chinuch gives the reason because it's just going to continue on and on. But that's another possible reason. The Sefer Chinuch in a different place, by Lo Sikum V'Lo Sito. By Lo Sikum V'Lo Sito, he says that reason. Because maybe this is Min HaShamayim that I should receive this. That's another possible reason.
And also, I want to understand that it's not mutar to answer. If you answer, you haven't done Avera. But it's not permissible to answer back right away, to insult him right away. But if you get angry and you answer back, you didn't do Avera because you're not a stone. But Avada, a person has to be able to think that, what came to me was because I am.
Yeah, but it is permissible. It's permissible to answer back. It is permissible.
Hashem also wants you to do Niter Shadin. I mean, it says,
Look, Boga Machteretz, is it permissible by Boga Machteretz?
Because he comes to kill you, therefore you have to defend yourself.
So you have to defend yourself also. You have to defend your honor. You have to defend you have a right to defend yourself, not to have that tsar, and not to be embarrassed. That's all. The Sefer Chinuch says it's the same thing. Yes.
Did the Rabbi say that you might be mechuyev to say it, and because it's like you're being modern?
Yeah.
So therefore, the Shinashar didn't mind not, but the
yeah, no, it's not an absolute chiyuv. It's a good idea. That's what I meant. That obligatory. I didn't mean that it's a real obligation. Yeah, no. That's it. So lifnim mishuras adin. There is a lifnim mishuras adin, and that a person doesn't care. He doesn't care that people might think that he admits to it. That's also part of the Lifnei
What if the
Mishras, I
guy's
think.
only saying something 100 times because he's waiting for a rock to finally explode? That's what the guy's been waiting for.
Yeah. Just a few more halachis. And we mentioned that there's a special issa of Ona'at Devarim by a ger, by a convert. There's also a special issa of Ona'at Devarim by Yisomim and Almonas, by orphans and by widows, because they have a very difficult time, right? They lost parents or lost a husband. What? Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. And therefore, you have to be. There's a special pasuk in the Torah: Almona v'yosam lo sa'anun. Don't cause anguish to a widow or to a yosam, to an orphan from. And then the Torah says the punishment for that is very, very severe. V'chora api v'arachti eschem b'cherev v'hayu neshechem almonas. The Torah says an amazing thing, right? If you cause anguish to almonis, right, so then your wife will become an almona. You cause anguish to yisomim, your children will become yisomim. It'll be a midah keneged midah. And what is the definition of a yosom? A yosom is anyone, an orphan, even orphaned from one parent. They have the other parent. They still have the status of a yosom. And up to what age they're not considered to be a yosom for the rest of their life. As long as they need somebody, an adult, to take care of them. Once they're on their own, and they don't have to rely on an adult, they're no longer considered to be yisomim, right? They get married and they have their own family, they're no longer yisomim. Otherwise, everybody at some point in time would be considered to be a yosem. No, as long as they need an adult to take care of them, that they have to turn to rely on an adult, so then they have a status of a yosem. After that, now, what's the status of an almana? What's the definition of a widow? A widow is whether the husband died when she was young or even when she's old. She's in her 60s and her husband died. She has the status of an almana, and one has to be so careful in terms of speaking to an almana and speaking to Yisrael. And Rabbeim in school, in yeshiva, have a problem because there are kids who are Yisomim. They have to be more careful the way they speak to those kids, to those boys, more careful than the way they speak to other children, right? And they have to realize that this child is a yasam, and they have to be very, very careful with their words. There is a very interesting machlokes that's very nogea to Aseret Yemei Tshuva between Rabbi Yisrael Salanta and the Chafetz Chaim, just to show you how far the Issa of Ona'at Devarim can go. What happened, we know the halacha is that Averis bein Adam lachaveiro, between man and his fellow man, even if you say vidui, you don't get kapara unless what? What do you have to do? You have to be mafayis, you have to appease him, right? You have to go and ask mechila. You have to ask mechila. Now, when you're asking mechila on a particular avera you did to him, lechatchila, you should be mefarit, the chet. You should tell him what you did. What happens if he doesn't know? He doesn't know that you spoke lashon hara about him to somebody. And if you'll go over to him and say, I want to tell you that I spoke lashon hara to you about to somebody about you, and this is what I said, you're going to cause him a lot of tsar. He didn't, because he's just finding out about it now. Do you have to tell him the particular aveira, the particular lashon hara you spoke about him, or can you just go over to him, as most of us do, and say, "Are you meichel me?" Right? A general mechila without specifying the particular aveira that you did against him. Right? So Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, when he was asked this question, he said, in a case like this, where you're going to cause him tsar by telling him about the lashon hara you spoke against him, you're not supposed to tell him that. Just ask for a general mechila. Be meichel me. Because if you'll tell him the lashon hara, you're going to cause him tsar. You'll cause him anguish. And you'll be over on Ona'at Devarim. And the fact that it's Ona'at Devarim does not, well, if it's Ona'at Devarim, the fact that you want to appease him and you want to get kapara for the Aveira of Lashon Hara that you did cannot push aside the Aveira of Ona'at Devarim because it's so severe. Chafetz Chaim disagreed. Chafetz Chaim says no. You have to tell him the specific Lashon Hara that you said about him, and even though he'll have anguish, but this is part of the tshuva process. So it's a machlokes. It's a famous machlokes between Rabbi Yisrael Salanta and the Chafetz Chaim. And it seems, who do we paskin like in that? It seems I read that Rabbi Kollel and Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky both say that we should follow the Rabbi Yisrael Salanta. That if it's going to be someone, if you're going to tell him what you said about him or what you did against him, right? He's going to have tsar. You shouldn't. Don't tell him what you did or what you said. Just ask him, are you meichel me? If I did any averis against you, are you meichel me? And hopefully he will be meichel. What? Halacha l'maisa, it seems that you don't have to tell him. You just ask for a general. If there are things that he does know about, right? Because you embarrassed him at one point, so he knows about them. So then you should go over to him and say, I'm sorry for embarrassing you on that occasion, and are you meichel? Because it's not going to cause him tsar. He knows about it already. But if to tell him something new that he doesn't know about, that's going to cause him tsar, that will be a violation of Ona'at Devarim.
If I did something.
If I did something, yeah. But to specify something that you know it's going to cause him tsar because he doesn't know about it. You told somebody else about something about him. So then you're not. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta said you're not supposed to do that. That seems to be the halacha l'maisa. Yes.
He says that he knows about it. Why should I mention it?
Why should you mention? Because the halacha says that you should be mefarit the chet. When you're asking for mechila, you should specify the aver if you can. And he already knows. But you're asking him mechila on this particular thing that I did to you, right? So that's a much more powerful mechila rather than just say, "Are you meichel me?" So who's going to say I'm not meichel you, right? Everybody goes around erev Yom Kippur and they ask their friends, they ask their neighbors, "Are you meichel me?" So you say, "I'm meichel." Doesn't have the same meaning as if you say, "Are you meichel me? Remember that day when I embarrassed you in front of the shul, and he says I'm meichel." That's much more powerful. That's a real mechila. So that's why lechatchila you should. What's that?
It's not good. What do you do?
No, but what do you mean?
The generic mechila.
Generic works. I guess it's a good question. Generic mechila will work. But it's not as powerful, I guess, in terms of erasing the Aveira. In other words, the Aveira now become, the Aveira is not, sometimes when you erase a paper, right, sometimes you erase the ink, there's nothing left at all. And sometimes it just becomes lighter. So I imagine there's a difference in terms of what remains after the Mechila. The generic Mechila might not be as powerful erasing the Aveira completely. Yes. B'diavad though, yeah, that's what we do. What? L'chatchila, it's better if you remember and you're able to. L'chatchila, it's better to mention.
What's the mechila for? Is it for me or is it for the other person?
Mechila is for you, the person who did the aveira. You need mechila. Kapara, in order to get an atonement on averis ben adam lachavero, you need three things. You need to say vidui. Ashamnu bagadnu al chet. You need to, if it's money that you caused him a loss, so you stole money from him, you have to return the money, and you also have to be mefayis es chaver. You have to appease him, and you have to ask him for mechila.
What about the kids? They cannot be mefayis. I mean, if their kids, less than 15 years old.
Ketanim.
Could you ask mechila from them?
Can you ask mechila from them?
Could they be mochel?
I don't think they can be meichel. No, you have to wait. There's stories about the Chazanish that he waited till they became bar mitzvah. The stipler. There's a story about the stipler. He waited till bar mitzvah. He remembered 7 years later that when they became bar mitzvah, he remembered that I did something wrong to him when he was 5 years old, 6 years old. So then he went. I just want to just sort of finish up because it's getting a little late, and I want to finish up with a vort from two things. First of all, on Yom Kippur, we're going to be saying vidui, right? We say, I imagine, the Sfardim also have al-chet, right? You have the al-chet. So if you look through the al-chet where we specify different averas we've done in the past year, so more than 1/4, more than 25% of the averas that we specify have to do with speech, have to do with our speaking. Whether it's Lashon Hara, it's Ona'at Devarim, it's Bracha Levatola, it's Nivul Peh, we say things that we shouldn't be saying, all kinds of different averas of speech. There's such an emphasis on that because, as we know, the Targum Onkelos says, the Tselem Elokim, Vayhi Adam Lenefesh Chaya, the Targum Onkelos says, L'ruach L'mala, the essence of man, and what makes us special and unique is our koach hadibur, our ability to speak, right? That's we're in the image of Hashem, and if a person abuses his speech and uses it to do averos, right? So he is mizalzel, he is disgracing the tselem Elokim that we are. So it is so chomur, these averos, that 25% of the al-chetz have to do with speech. The Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, the Rosh Hashiva of the Mir, gave a shmuz a number of years. I heard it personally, and it's in his Sichas Musa, where he points out the consequences of Ona'at Devarim are so severe. Right? We usually think that there are consequences. It's an onesh. It's a punishment. Right? The consequences here, he says, are a different category. Chaim Shmulevitz points out the story that we just read on the Haftarah on Rosh Hashanah of Chana. Right? Chana didn't have children. Elkanah had 2 wives, Chana and Penina. Penina had many children, and Chana didn't have any children. And the pasuk says, and Chazal expand on this, that Penina spoke to Chana, and she said certain things to Chana which caused Chana anguish. Ona'at Devarim. She said things to cause Chana, I have children and you don't have children, so maybe I'm more of a tzadekis than you are. She said it, we don't know exactly what she said, but the pasuk says, V'chiyasato tzoroso gam kas ba'avor harima. That Penina said words to Chana to cause her tsar, but she had a purpose in mind, so that Chana would daven. Rashi explains, so that Chana would daven for children. So Penina's intention was noble, to get Chana to this. She felt maybe Chana's not davening enough for children, if she'll daven, and that's exactly what Chana did. She went up to Mishkan Shiloh and she davened, and she had a child, Shmuel, a year later. So the Chazal say that what happened to Penina, she lost all of her children. All of her children died. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says, how could that be? That when she caused anguish to Chana, it was with a noble intention. It was to get Chana to daven. And Mistama, she did it. It wasn't easy for Penina to speak to Chana in this manner. So why did she get such a severe punishment that all of her children died? And Chaim Shmulevitz says an amazing thing. He says, I'm going to read it in Hebrew and translate it. Hapogea b'chaveiro hareu kamachnis yodo litocha eish. That if a person insults or embarrasses or causes anguish to his friend, it's like you're putting your hand in fire. Now, when you put your hand in fire, it doesn't matter what your intent is. Your intent could be the most noble, the most positive intent. What's going to happen? It's going to burn. Naturally, your hand is going to burn. So Chaim Shmulevitz said, Onos Devarim, there's a natural consequence from Onos Devarim, just like putting your hand in fire. It's not so much a punishment, but this is the way Hashem created the world. That just like He created certain laws of nature, right, in terms of the physical world, He created a law of nature in terms of Onos Devarim, that when a person causes anguish to someone else, it's like they're putting their hand in the fire, and naturally they're going to be punished. And the Gemara tells, and he brings another Gemara in Ksuvis, a story about Rabbi Chumi. Rabbi Chumi used to go off to learn. He would stay away for months at a time, learning in yeshiva. His wife was left behind with the children, and he would come back erev Yom Kippur. Every year, erev Yom Kippur, he would return home. One year, he got so involved in his learning that on erev Yom Kippur, he didn't return. He was so immersed, and he forgot that he was intending to return, but he returned in the morning. Now it was already the afternoon of erev Yom Kippur, and he hadn't returned. And his wife was waiting eagerly to see Rav Rechumi, to see her husband, and she kept on saying to her, Akshav Yavo, he's going to come. Akshav Yavo, he's going to come. And he didn't come at the time when she expected him to come. And she started crying. And the Gemara tells that what happened was Rabbi Chumi was sitting in an attic, and he was learning. He had delayed leaving, and the attic suddenly collapsed, and Rabbi Chumi died. Because of the tears of his wife, because of the anguish that he caused her. He didn't even intend to cause her that anger, but he knew, he had an idea in the back of his mind that, she's waiting for me eagerly, and he delayed coming. Ad kedei kach, to that extent, the Ona'at Devarim, it wasn't through words, but it's his lack of coming. He's not coming at the time which he expected him. And as Chazal say, a person has to be so careful when it comes to Ona'at Devarim by one's wife, because dimosa mitzviyah, because she's very sensitive and easily, she'll cry very easily. So this is what happened. This is what happened to Reb Chumi. Also, it's like putting a hand in the fire, and the hand is going to get scorched. Even if one has noble intentions, is doing something very positive, you have to be so careful about that. And so, we still have a few days left to Aseres Yemei Tshuva, to Yom Kippur. And these are days where we have to work on ourselves, and especially work on the averis, the transgressions that have to do with speech, with lashon hara. And now we know all about Ona'at Devarim and how severe Ona'at Devarim is. So when everyone goes home, you'll make sure that the next 3 or 4 days, when you speak to your wives, right, you'll speak to them with a greater sensitivity, and compliment them, make them feel good. Certainly not to get upset. Certainly not to criticize. Sometimes criticism is necessary, but even when it's necessary, to do it in the proper way, not to cause them anguish, because that's a very severe aveira of Ona'at Devarim. So, along with all the other areas that we have to work on during the rest of the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, I think this is an area that we should definitely focus on, especially since we do focus on it so much during the Vidui on Yom Kippur, right? To be much more careful with the Tselem Elokim of who we are. Our Koach HaDibur, our speech, defines who we are. And do we really have a Tselem Elokim in the image of Hashem? So, Be'ezras Hashem, we should all be Zoiche to do the proper tshuva and the proper davening by the rest of the days, and during Yom Kippur we should all be zeicha to a gemar chasima tova, all of us and all of Klal Yisrael.